going on, vinyl community? Welcome to another video with the Record Spinner. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing the best of the best ofs, 5 essential rock compilations. Compilations, best ofs, or greatest hits packages do fulfill their purpose for music fans. It's a gateway drug, a sort of primer for new potential listeners, or if you're an avid fan and you just want the heavy hitters under one umbrella, then you can be pleased. I've said this before and I'll always stand firm on it. I don't think there's such thing as a perfect compilation because regardless of how solid they can be, there's always discrepancies on what songs were left off, why they included certain songs, what eras got undermined, etc. These are the little things that us music aficionados tend to nitpick. But with that said, there are some compilations that are noteworthy of exploring, listening, and owning in any record collection. Now, if you're a longtime viewer of my channel, you know the artists that I love and what I usually speak highly of. But if you're a new viewer, my roots are in rock music, hence why this is titled 5 Essential Rock Compilations. Now, it's so easy to pick any compilation that's come out in the last 10 to 20 years from bands that are deemed as legacy acts that essentially profit, albeit record sales or touring, off of what they've done prior. But for this video, I wanted to give myself a sort of challenge. So I chose 5 compilations that came out while an artist was still active back in their heyday in the 70s. So does that mean that these comps focus on specific limited eras instead of encompassing their entire career? Yes, but I will explain why they hold their significance and why they are noteworthy. There's quite a bit to get through, so enough of the chit chat. Let's jump into what this video is all about. First up is Double Platinum by Kiss. Did you really think I wasn't going to mention my favorite band? It's not a Record Spinner video if there isn't any mention of Kiss. Now, when this comp came out in 1978, Kiss was at their absolute peak between topping the Gallup poll, sold-out tours, record sales reaching gold and platinum status, as well as the merchandising machine. And this was just before the solo albums and the Kiss Meets the Phantom movie kind of contributed to the group's detriment, so the timing was right to put out a compilation gathering the best of what they had done. Now, I have always said that the 6 studio albums that Kiss released between 74 to 77 are a Bible. It's the blueprint for what made this band so great. So I have no qualms with this comp focusing on that period. Granted, I feel that some albums like Hotter Than Hell and Love Gun are underrepresented, but when you're working with a 20-song template, you gotta pick and choose where you can. Now, what gives fans value for their money is the fact that this wasn't really a sort of cut and paste type of compilation, pulling from albums that people may have already owned. Every track was remixed by Sean Delaney and Mike Stone, mainly to give all the songs a sort of unison feel, since those 6 albums were produced by different people, such as Bob Ezrin and Eddie Kramer, to name a few. There's also the case where some songs got completely edited and almost reinvented, particularly Calling Dr. Love, Firehouse, and such, so I can imagine the elements of surprise for a fan that approached this first and then worked their way backwards and heard the original versions. And to add more exclusivity, there's a re-recording of Strutter dubbed Strutter 78, which gives the straight-ahead rocker more of a disco feel, kind of foreshadows the direction that Kiss would delve into on their next album at the time. Whether it be catalog-based or milked by Universal, Kiss is notorious for having one too many compilations over the years, but given Double Platinum's emphasis on Kiss's most influential era that made the most impact, this is a great place to start for any newcomer. Next up is Changesonebowie by David Bowie. Bowie is one of those artists throughout his entire career that constantly evolved, changed, and adapted to wherever his creative juices led him. So it's tough to narrow down a certain era or run of albums that best represent his artistry. So it's the compilations department that I think do some justice in exploring the scope of Bowie's creativity and how much he changed over the years. Fitting how I said change, hence the title of this release. Now, this came out in 1976 and was the first comp that had come out that didn't focus on his very early Decca material that most people tend to sometimes ignore. So it focuses on the period of 69 to 76. So unfortunately, it does miss out on the experimental and adventurous Berlin trilogy that came afterwards, as well as the 80s catalog where Bowie kind of became mainstream. Now, regardless, it is astounding how how, in a matter of the 7 years that this compilation focuses on, how much Bowie evolved as an artist, starting initially in this sort of acoustic folk direction with Space Oddity, then becoming this glam alien messiah with Ziggy Stardust, before embracing his self-described plastic soul period with Young Americans and Station to Station. Now, the track list is very concise and whittled down to feature the most noteworthy of prominent tracks and singles. Unfortunately, the albums Man Who Sold the World and Pinups are ignored, and the only non-album rarity is John I'm Only Dancing, which, depending on which pressing you have, it's either the original 1972 single version or the sax version that was recorded during the Aladdin Sane sessions. Now, this compilation became obsolete over time because it became replaced by Changesonebowie, released by Rykodisc in the 1990s, and all these tracks have appeared on numerous other Bowie compilations that have come out since, but at the time, this was a concise snapshot of a portion of Bowie's golden run. Next up is Endless Summer by the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys certainly left their mark in the early to mid-1960s with a string of hit singles that embodied the California sound revolving around surfing, cars, and romance. Of course, they would take a major musical leap with Pet Sounds, arguably one of the most important records in music history, and the aborted Smile Project is one of those big musical what-ifs that very much crumbled the Beach Boys' empire for the remainder of the decade. Now, going into the 1970s, they were crafting some of the best records of their career with Sunflower, Surf's Up, Carl and the Passions, and Holland. Musically strong albums, but the sales didn't match the ante of what they did before. Now, take a look at the context of the times in the mid-1970s. Vietnam War was winding down, the movie American Graffiti rekindled this interest in 1950s and 60s culture, and it felt like America wanted to bask in the nostalgia in simpler environment. And what better band do you connect with that culture? The Beach Boys. Now, not to play devil's advocate when it comes to record labels milking an artist's catalog, but Capitol knew what they were doing with Endless Summer. This compilation came out in 1974 and focuses only on the period of 62 to 65, just before they did Pet Sounds. Sure enough, this compilation gave the Beach Boys a major resurgence. It stayed in the charts for 3 years, sold 3 million copies, re-established their popularity, and found themselves playing at sports arenas and stadiums. But it also kind of grandfathered them into becoming an oldies act, so they didn't evolve much musically from this point forward, and if it wasn't for Endless Summer's success, it wouldn't have established the foundation that basically carried the band out from then up until today, basically. Because when you go out and see Mike Love and Bruce Johnston going out under the Beach Boys banner, you can bet that a portion of that set list will contain every song from Endless Summer. Now, despite all that, this compilation does its job with representing the early Beach Boys history and hearing how that music put them on the map for providing the soundtrack for California ideology. Next up is Greatest Hits by Queen. By the early 1980s, Queen had very much dominated the world between their home country of England, having a massive hit in America with Another One Bites the Dust, and playing to massive audiences at soccer stadiums in South America. Now, the timing of all of this to occur was perfect because 1981 was the technical year of Queen's 10th anniversary since the lineup we know and love became solidified in 1971. So what better thing to commemorate such occasion with than their first Greatest Hits package? Now, in terms of the track list, the foundation of this release centers on 17 tracks that Queen released as singles in the UK and charted within the top 20. So it's not exactly a complete singles collection, but it brings together the cream of the crop. And it's astounding when you look at the track list and you realize how many hits Queen had in just under 10 years and how remarkable these songs are in their own right. And to have them all under one umbrella almost feels like song power overload. Dare I say it, if you're only focusing on the hits, this can be seen as a perfect compilation. See, I'm already contradicting myself when I said my statement earlier. And I'm sure those that reside in the UK firmly believe that because it's literally the #1 best-selling album in the UK, selling over 7 million copies, being certified 23 times platinum, spent over 1,000 weeks in the charts, and it resides itself in good company alongside gargantuan albums like Dark Side of the Moon, where where 1 in every 3 families in the UK are most likely to own a copy. This compilation isn't just for the Queen novice, it's for the music lover. Last but not least is We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll by Black Sabbath. Remember what I said about labels milking an artist's catalog? In this case, there's also crummy ex-managers. By 1975, Sabbath were undergoing stressful legal battles with their former manager Patrick Meehan. Those frustrations fueled the musical direction and album title of the album, Sabotage. Outside of business and financial mismanagement, Meehan had a heavy hand with Sabbath's back catalog, to the point of authorizing so many pointless compilations that came out in various territories during the early part of the 70s. And that power still stood when the two entities parted ways. So when the label NEMS acquired the Sabbath catalog, Meehan wasted no time authorizing this compilation, to the point where the band wouldn't receive any money from it, and the band became aware of its release when fans asked to get their copies signed. So when you take into account a lot of these sort of behind the scenes tidbits, it's easy to look at this as the sort of black sheep of Sabbath compilations, but it did become a multi-million seller. This compilation focuses on Sabbath's career up until 1975, which many would say was the cutoff of the original lineup's golden run before it all started to go kind of topsy-turvy towards the end of the decade. You have major emphasis of the first 4 albums, and unfortunately 1 track from the band's then 2 recent albums. Although well known to American fans for its inclusion on the debut Swapping Out Evil Woman, the song Wicked World was featured and was kind of deemed as a rarity since it was a non-album B-side to the Evil Woman single within the UK, so that track was probably the incentive for fans to kind of seek it out. I'd imagine this is where a lot of people started out for Sabbath. Hell, I remember my introduction to Sabbath was listening to my dad's cassette copy of this compilation. It goes to show that as long as it features the heavy hitters, it does fulfill its purpose. So there you guys go. Those are the best of the best ofs. 5 essential rock compilations. Now, we only scratched the surface of great rock comps in today's video. And yes, there were plenty others that I could have discussed, but that's why I do follow-up in part 2 videos. So if you want to see me discuss more essential rock compilations, let me know in the comments down below, and also let me know what you think are some great rock compilations. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead, give it a like, and subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video, and most importantly, keep the records spinning.